Hey guys, my name is Gradale, and I'm back with my second Genshin Impact team comp. If you're looking for a second team to help you clear the new abyss, especially 12th floor, or you like to experiment with teams, or maybe just curious if you can finally use the range slasher, then stay tuned as we talk about Electro-Charged Albedo. But before that, and like the previous video, this is not to show you big numbers, but rather highlight the mechanics and synergies of the team so you can decide if it fits your playstyle. Right, Electro-Charged Albedo. Interesting mix, would you agree? But why or how did I even end up with such a team? Well, TLDR is that most people think that electro-based reactions are crap, with good reasons of course. But I really find it interesting and fun to use as it offers mechanics that changes how you play the game. So let's discuss Electro-Charge first. Quick overview. Electro-Charge is when Electro meets Hydro. It deals electro damage based on the level and the elemental mastery of the character triggering the reaction. Applying Electro to a Hydro affected enemy will deal electro damage twice with 1 second delay. On the other hand, applying Hydro to Electro will deal electro damage and spread Hydro to nearby enemies, then deal another electro damage. So as a Razor main, I started my experiment by adding Xingqiu in my team. But it just doesn't feel right. Maybe because Razor's kit isn't really designed as a team player. Fischl, on the other hand, is great DPS or support. I'm sure you can easily find in-depth videos or guide about these characters, but if not, I'll post some links in the description below to make this video as short as possible, so we can talk about the things that actually matter in this comp. So the first one of course is her elemental skill. This summons Oz that shoots Electro to nearby enemies. Her burst deals a good amount of damage and then summons Oz. When I play her at C0, I normally prioritize her burst to summon Oz because it deals more damage. But if you have C2, then her skill does more damage. And at C4, I prioritize burst again. This is of course assuming that both talents are at the same level. At C6, Oz will now attack with your active character, which is awesome for guaranteed reactions. Which brings me to her A4 passive talent. Every time your active character triggers electro-based reaction when Oz is nearby, then you will deal additional 80% electro damage. I have C6 but C0 would work just fine. And then we have Barbara. Yes, Barbara. She actually serves a lot of purpose in this team. She is the healer of course. She is the Thrilling Tales buffer. She is the Electro-Charged enabler. She is my carry when I'm up against one enemy, like elites or boss. Her normal and charge attacks is for her to trigger reactions. If you have C6 Fischl, you can trigger Fischl's A4 with Barbara's normal attacks. You might have seen this great synergy in other videos already, so I won't explain too much. Again, I'll provide example links in the description below. Her skill leaves an aura to your active character that heals them but also applies wet status to enemies it touches. Downside is it has a very long cooldown. Thankfully, her skill's duration is extended by her A4 and it is reduced by her C2. Her burst just heals, so let's move on. If you've watched my previous video, you'll know that I prioritize Elemental Resonance, not just for its additional buff or effects, but also for the ability to regenerate energy faster. You can check that video out if you want to know more about this. So my options were Hydro and Electro Resonance. And again, it's obvious. Barbara is more than enough healing for the team. So Electro it is. And as mentioned earlier, I don't think Razor would fit in here, at least on how I want to play the team. But I think Beidou will be amazing. Her skill does a good amount of electro damage on press, and huge amount when you perfect counter. Her burst leaves an aura that continuously applies electro to nearby enemies, and it also deals additional damage that jumps to other enemies when you do normal attacks. With both Barbara's skill and Beidou's burst up, you will be triggering Electro Charge continuously. And since this is a Electro-Charged team, I wanted to at least increase the reaction damage. I've looked into Sucrose with very decent, which is a great option here to be honest. But in general, I feel that Vivi requires more attention in which element to swirl. And I'm not really good at that. Which finally leads me to Albedo. Albedo's A4 can provide EM for the whole team, which overall increases all our characters' reaction damage. His skill provides additional, consistent damage and the possibility to generate shields, which is something that I personally like because I don't have to worry too much about dodging. It's also worth noting that his blossoms doesn't really affect the reactions we're trying to do here. Albedo himself can also proc Fischl's A4. His burst deals decent damage and almost guaranteed crystallized to generate shields. I personally prefer to gear them all as supports, because first, these units are great as a support, and you might already build them for that. Second is that I'm not really doing normal attack that much, at least on how I play. But that being said, you're free to choose whoever you want to be your main in the team, your character to do normal attacks. So I'll include possible gearing options for DPS as well, but I intentionally excluded 5-star weapons. All of them are great, so if you have one, use it. I will also mention my preference, but I can't really rank them because I believe it depends on your playstyle and many other factors. And lastly, I won't dive too much in every builds because again, there are a lot of in-depth character videos already out there. I've also done some math so I can show you comparisons. But be aware that all these calculations are without substats, but with max main stats to simplify the calculation. The damage values are crit damage, which includes the character's crit damage values, but without resistance reduction. So the numbers are bigger than what you would normally see in your screens. So feel free to pause the video if I go too fast. So let's start with Fischl, and here are our options. Baseline is, I would always recommend 2-piece Thundering Fury for her since Oz deals so much electro damage. I'm using Thundering Fury and Gladiator because it's well balanced. As explained earlier, her burst also deals good amount of damage, and depending on your playstyle and constellations, you can opt to use Noblesse. Gamblers will of course increase Oz damage, so it's a very valid option. Worth noting though that Gambler is a 4-star, so you will lose 4 levels and 2 substat rolls per piece compared to 5-star. 4-piece Thundering Fury is also good, but only if you play her as your main because it can increase Oz uptime even more and boost her reaction damages. As for weapons, I'm using Stringless, mainly for its passive. You can also use crit weapons in general because they offer higher potential damage. Rust and Prototype Crescent will boost all her talents damage. Energy recharge weapons are kind of okay because she already have high uptime with Oz. But if you like spamming her burst, then why not? As for Barbara, I use full Maiden set, but I rarely use her burst since Albedo shields help mitigate most of the damages. Maiden EM is my preferred build because I want her to do more reaction damage. But if you want her to dish out hydro damage, then your options are Heart of Depth or Wanderer's Troop. For her weapons, I'm using Trailing Tails for the massive attack buff, but you can use any of these weapons really. Mapamare and Sacrificial Fragment will provide more Electro-Charged damage, but I would prefer Sacrificial Fragment for bigger EM and uptime for her skill. For a main build however, I'm kinda leaning towards Widset. Beidou is a lot like Fischl to be honest. I use Thundering Fury and Glads as well so I can boost both burst and skill. But I will probably try full Thundering Fury once I get her on C4 and make her my main, and if I get better at countering. Her weapon options are those with energy recharge, attack percent, or crit secondary stats. I like what I'm using currently, which is Sacrificial Greatsword, so that I can trigger more Electro-Charge or counters. As for the range slasher, it actually looks good on this team since we can keep its passive up most of the time. I will definitely use this. But if you want a more stable options, you can't go wrong with attack or crit weapons like Prototype Archaic. For Albedo, I find Petra works great on this team, which I'll explain in a bit. You can use any build you want for him in general, but you want to at least make his Blossom deal more damage. For his weapon, like most in-depth videos out there, I also prefer Harbinger of Dawn R5, especially with Barbara on the team. We can easily keep its passive up. But if not, Festering is also great. Alright, now for the rotation. I normally start with Fischl's Burst or skill, then immediately switch to Albedo to pop his skill then burst. This would almost guarantee that I can pick up Geo or Electro Crystals to activate Petra buff, and picking up means that we need to go in melee range. Then switch to Barbara and use her skill. This would then wet nearby enemies and trigger Electro-Charged plus spreading Hydro. Then switch to Beidou to pop her burst. If there are a lot of enemies, I just hold her E until it expires. Then at this point, you are free to do whatever you want. You can go back to Barbara or just run around Albedo's field to apply Hydro. You can go to Albedo to burst or pick up some crystals. You can continue attacking with Beidou, but I normally switch to Fischl to resummon Oz. You can do this until Barbara's skill fades. Then just repeat the rotation. And for now, I will let the clip continue to showcase the team. And that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed and picked up something new in the video. Feel free to leave your questions or thoughts on the comments section, and I'll try to answer them if I can. Till next time!